these numbers are wrong. Victor Lim set down his coffee and looked at the intern the way executives look at weather. Mildly inconvenient, easily ignored. The client retention figure in the due diligence package. Isa placed her printed calculation on the table. It's inflated by 11 percentage points. It's within acceptable modeling variance. It's not modeling variance. 3 enterprise clients who discontinued their contracts in Q2 are still listed as active. I cross-referenced the billing records. Victor looked at the paper without picking it up. You cross-referenced? Yes, sir. You're 3 weeks into your internship. The numbers are still wrong. The conference room on the 14th floor of Apex Data Solutions had 6 other people in it. None of them moved. What none of them understood, not Victor Lim, not COO Denise Valdez watching from the corner, not Marcos Santos, who had trained Isa and now studied his own hands very carefully, was that the retention figures had been prepared for Meridian Capital Partners. And the managing partner of Meridian Capital Partners had been waiting for his 8 a.m. call with Isabel Reyes for 2 months. Because Isabel Reyes was the person who decided whether Meridian funded anything. Before we go any further, type 777 in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. And I want to ask you something before this story really begins. When you see something wrong and fixing it might cost you something, what do? Tell me honestly. Now let us go back and see what happened the morning an intern in rubber shoes walked into a BGC conference room and changed the direction of everything. Isa Reyes had been disciplined about notebooks since she was 17. Not the expensive kind. The kind from the school supply store near their apartment in Cebu, with the plastic cover and the thin pages that bled ink if you pressed too hard. She had gone through 9 of them since she started university, filling each one with calculations, function notes, debugging logs, and the occasional margin observation that was too small to deserve a separate document, but too important to lose. The 10th notebook was different. Her father Dado had given it to her during her last hospital visit, 2 months before he died. It was bound in soft brown leather, slightly too good for the use she intended to put it to, with cream-colored pages that did not bleed. He had pressed it into her hands on a Tuesday afternoon when the light was coming through the hospital window at an angle that made the room look more peaceful than it was. She had opened it to see if he had written anything inside. He had. On the inside cover, in handwriting that was careful and slightly uneven because his hands had already begun to shake, "Huwag hayaang takutin ka ng kapangyarihan ng iba. Ang totoo ay palaging mas matibay. Don't let other people's power frighten you. The truth is always stronger." Dado Reyes had not been a philosopher. He was a programmer from Cebu who had built a fintech platform in the years when everyone said fintech was too risky for the Philippine market, and who had been proven wrong about that, and who had then sold the platform for more money than anyone in their family had ever seen, and who had then been diagnosed with cancer at 53 and died at 55 before he had the chance to do everything he intended to do with the rest of his life. He had structured the Reyes Technology Trust the year before he died. He had spent a considerable amount of time with lawyers, much of it in hospital chairs, making the documents as clear as he could make them. The trust held a controlling stake in Meridian Capital Partners, the private equity firm he had co-founded after the platform's sale. Its terms were specific. Full trustee authority would transfer to his daughter Isabel on her 22nd birthday. He did not tell Isa this in detail. He told her only, "I have tried to arrange things so that the work continues." He told her to finish her degree, to find work where she could learn from the inside, and to use her eyes carefully before she used her authority. Isa had done all 3. She had graduated at the top of her computer science batch from a state university in Cebu. She had moved to Manila with 2 bags and a firm refusal of the allowance the trust's administrators offered her. She wanted to earn her own way, long enough to know how to read other people's numbers honestly. She had found a room in a boarding house in Mandaluyong, taken a weekend food delivery job to cover the gap between her rent and her first paycheck, and applied for a junior analyst internship at Apex Data Solutions without mentioning her last name's connection to anything. Apex had been seeking a capital commitment from Meridian Capital Partners for 11 months. The deal was close to finalizing. Isa's internship had begun 3 weeks before the due diligence package was scheduled for submission. She had not come to sabotage anything. She had come to learn from the inside how companies prepared their numbers for investor review, whether those numbers were prepared honestly, and whether the people who prepared them were the kind of people whose work deserved to be funded. She carried the leather notebook everywhere. She wrote her calculations in it. She had filled 14 pages in 3 weeks. On the 15th page, she had written the client retention discrepancy. Victor Lim looked at the printed paper Isa had placed on the conference table. His coffee cup was still in his hand. "Sit down," he said. "I'm already sitting, sir." He was not looking at her. He was looking at Denise Valdez, whose expression communicated very efficiently that this was a problem that should not exist. Marco Santos, Isa's direct supervisor, was 34 pages into a presentation deck on his laptop. He had not closed it when the conversation began. He had not looked up. "Miss Reyes," Victor said, "what exactly do you think you found?" 3 clients listed as active in the Q2 retention report terminated their contracts between April and June. I found the termination records in the billing system when I was cross-referencing the compliance logs. Isa placed a second document beside the first. If those 3 accounts are removed, the annual retention rate drops from 94% to 83%. 11 percentage points, Victor repeated. "Yes, sir. And you think this matters because the 94% figure is in the due diligence package being prepared for Meridian Capital Partners." Isa kept her voice even. "If a funding decision is made based on a retention figure that doesn't include accounts that actually left, the investor is working with incomplete information." Victor set down his coffee. He turned fully toward her for the first time. "You've been here 3 weeks. The billing records have been here longer." A sound from the corner. Denise, covering something with a small, careful cough. Victor did not look at her. "Miss Reyes, the due diligence package reflects methodology approved by senior leadership. The accounts you're describing were in end-of-term status during the measurement period, which qualifies them for inclusion under our internal retention framework. End-of-term status means the contract ended. That's a departure. Our framework classifies." "Sir, I understand the framework. I'm saying the framework produces a number that doesn't match what actually happened to those clients. And that number is going to be seen by an investor who is being asked to commit a significant amount of capital to this company." The room was very quiet. Marco had finally closed his laptop. Victor's expression had not changed, but something behind it had. Not anger yet. The thing that precedes anger in executives who are accustomed to being right by definition. The recognition that someone in the room is not behaving as expected. "What do you want me to do with this observation?" he said. "Correct the figure in the package before it's submitted. That is not your decision." "I know. That's why I'm bringing it to you." Victor stood. He walked to the end of the table. He picked up the paper Isa had printed and looked at it properly for the first time. She watched him read it. She watched him understand it. She watched him decide. This level of retention analysis is beyond your current scope, he said. You were assigned to format the compliance appendices. I was checking the compliance appendices when I found the billing discrepancy. I didn't ask you to check the billing system. No, sir. The discrepancy came up in the course of the work you did assign me. Victor set the paper down. He reached past Isa's shoulder and picked up the leather notebook from the corner of the table where she had set it. He looked at it, the worn cover, the inscription barely visible on the inside, and placed it on the edge of the desk, not handed back, placed with a specific kind of deliberateness. I think we're done here, he said. Sir, the package? I think we're done, Miss Reyes. He looked toward Denise. Process her exit this afternoon. Marco Santos looked up from the table where his closed laptop sat. He looked at Isa. He looked at Victor. He looked back at his laptop. He said nothing. Isa reached past Victor and picked up the notebook herself. She held it against her side. May I ask what reason is being given for the termination? Victor turned toward the door. Failure to follow proper scope protocols. That will be entered in the HR system. Denise will handle it. Thank you, Isa said. She did not say it angrily. She said it the way her father used to say it when someone had answered a question he already knew the answer to, with the particular courtesy of someone collecting information. She gathered her printed calculation. She picked up her bag. She left the conference room. In the hallway, she opened the notebook to the inside cover and read the inscription once, quietly, to herself. Then she walked toward the elevator and took out her phone. The lobby of Apex Data Solutions had a security desk, a turnstile, and a coffee station that nobody ever used because the machine was always out of paper cups. Isa stood beside the turnstile with her temporary access badge still in her hand. She had not surrendered it yet, because Denise had not yet processed the paperwork, and called the managing partner of Meridian Capital Partners. She did not put the phone to her ear. She set it on the security desk and put it on speaker. Not because she wanted to be heard, because she had 6 minutes before Victor's assistant would come down to collect the badge, and she wanted the conversation to happen here. The phone rang once. Good morning. Meridian Capital, Benjamin Ui's office. Good morning. This is Isabel Reyes. I need to speak with Mang Benny directly. Of course, Miss Reyes. One moment. The security guard at the desk, a man named Rick, who had greeted Isa every morning for 3 weeks and once lent her an umbrella when she forgot hers, looked at the phone and then at Isa with an expression of mild puzzlement. Isa. The voice on the phone was warm and unhurried. Benjamin Ui, 62 years old, managing partner. I was expecting your call this week. How is the placement going? The placement has ended this morning. The CEO of Apex Data Solutions fired me about 20 minutes ago for identifying a material error in the investor due diligence package. A brief pause. What kind of error? Client retention figures inflated by 11 percentage points. 3 enterprise accounts that terminated contracts are listed as active. The inflated figure is currently in the package prepared for Meridian's review. Another pause. Longer. Isa, under the trust terms that activated last month, you now have full authority as controlling trustee. What would you like us to do with the Apex commitment? The elevator behind the turnstile opened. Victor Lim stepped out. Denise was beside him. They had come down faster than expected. Victor had decided to oversee the exit personally. He stopped when he heard the voice from the phone. What would you like us to do with the Apex commitment? Suspend the commitment pending an independent audit of the client retention data, Isa said. Do not proceed to closing until Meridian's own team has verified the figures. Victor took one step toward the security desk. Understood. Benjamin's voice was professional and final. I'll have the audit team contact Apex's compliance office by end of day. The commitment is suspended as of now. Isa picked up the phone. Thank you, Mangbeni. She ended the call. Victor was standing 3 feet away. His expression had passed through confusion and arrived somewhere that was not yet anger, but was moving toward it quickly. Who was that? He said. Denise answered before Isa could. Her voice was low and very quiet. Victor. A pause. The Reyes Technology Trust. Victor looked at her. Denise looked at Isa. Dado Reyes, the fintech founder. He co-founded Meridian before he died. She looked at the notebook under Isa's arm, the worn leather cover, the simple binding. His daughter. Victor stood perfectly still. Isa looked at him, not with triumph, with the same calm she had carried into the conference room. I came to work here because my father told me to use my eyes before I used my authority, she said. I was using my eyes. Victor's voice came out quieter than it had upstairs. You were investigating us. I was doing the compliance appendices you assigned me. The discrepancy was in the data you gave me to format. She picked up her access badge from the desk. I was going to correct the figure and not mention my connection to Meridian at all. I was going to do it the right way. She held the badge out to Rick, who accepted it with the careful expression of someone who understood that the situation had become too large for normal procedures. You fired me instead, Isa said. She walked toward the glass entrance. Miss Reyes. Victor's voice followed her. Let's discuss this properly. Isa pushed through the door. The Manila morning was already bright and warm. The kind of morning that does not wait for anyone's boardroom to resolve itself. She stood on the pavement and opened the notebook to page 15. The numbers were still there. 11 percentage points. 3 terminated clients listed as active. The truth, exactly as she had written it, still stronger than anyone's authority to ignore it. The audit took 4 days. Meridian's team was thorough in the particular way that firms become thorough when the person who has just suspended an 8-figure commitment is also the controlling trustee who determines whether the firm continues to manage that commitment. They reviewed billing records, contract termination notices, renewal correspondence, and the internal framework Victor had used to classify end-of-term accounts as retention. The framework was technically documented. It had been created by Victor and approved by Denise 18 months earlier. It was also, in the opinion of Meridian's auditors, a methodology designed to produce a specific number rather than to accurately describe client behavior. Marco Santos called Isa on the second day of the audit. I should have said something in the room, he said. Isa was at the boarding house, eating rice and studying the audit request documents Meridian had forwarded to her. I know. I knew you were right about the numbers. I've known the retention framework was misleading since Denise proposed it. A pause. I told myself it wasn't my call to make. It wasn't your call, Isa said, but it was your information. Marco was quiet for a moment. I want to submit a written correction to the board, confirming what you found, confirming the framework was designed to inflate the figure. What will that cost you? My job, probably. Isa looked at the notebook on the table beside her plate. The inscription on the inside cover. Ang totoo ay palaging mas matibay. Then do it because it's true, she said, not because of anything else. Marco submitted the written correction the following morning. It was 4 pages, carefully organized, with date-stamped billing records attached. He sent it to Meridian's audit team, to Apex's board of independent directors, and to the Securities and Exchange Commission's disclosure desk. Victor had him escorted from the building by afternoon. Denise sent Issa a message that evening. It said only, "We would like to discuss a resolution." Issa did not respond. The independent board of Apex Data Solutions convened 5 days after the audit began. They had 3 items to consider: the audit's preliminary findings, Marco's written correction, and a formal letter from Meridian Capital Partners regarding the status of the suspended commitment. The letter was signed by Benjamin Uri. It stated that Meridian Capital Partners, acting under the direction of the controlling trustee, would proceed with the capital commitment to Apex Data Solutions under 2 conditions. First, an independent review of executive conduct related to the preparation of the due diligence package. Second, the reinstatement of all employees dismissed in connection with the identification of retention figure inaccuracies. Victor Lim appeared before the board with his corporate attorney. The attorney argued that Victor's retention framework was a standard methodology used across the industry. He cited precedents. He questioned the audit team's qualifications. He suggested that the involvement of an intern with an undisclosed conflict of interest compromised the integrity of the entire review. The board chair, a retired judge named Sylvia Ocampo, looked at the attorney over her reading glasses. "Miss Reyes disclosed no conflict of interest," she said, "because she has no conflict of interest. She identified an error in data prepared for an investor. She reported it to the CEO. The CEO fired her. The fact that she later contacted the investor does not create a conflict. It describes a consequence. She concealed her connection to Meridian. She applied for an internship under her own name, passed your client's standard hiring process, and performed the work she was assigned. At no point did anyone from Apex ask her whether she held any interest in Meridian Capital Partners." Judge Ocampo looked at Victor. "Did you ask her?" Victor said nothing. "Mr. Lim," the judge continued, "the audit has confirmed that 3 enterprise clients who terminated contracts in Q2 were listed as active in the retention report. Your internal framework was used to justify this classification. Marco Santos has submitted a written statement confirming the framework was designed to produce a favorable figure rather than to accurately describe client behavior." She placed the audit summary on the table. "Do you dispute any of these findings?" Victor's attorney began to answer. Victor raised his hand to stop him. He looked at the table for a long moment. Then he said, "The methodology was approved at the executive level." "By yourself and Ms. Valdez?" "Yes. And when Ms. Reyes identified the discrepancy, you fired her rather than reviewing the figures." A pause. That decision was made quickly. It was made within an hour of her raising the concern. Judge Ocampo looked around the table at the other board members. "I think we have what we need." The board deliberated for 40 minutes. Their findings were read aloud by Judge Ocampo into a formal record. Victor Lim was removed as CEO for approving materially misleading investor materials and retaliating against an employee who identified the error. Denise Valdez was removed as COO for participating in the preparation of those materials and for falsifying disciplinary records after the dismissal. Both were barred from serving in executive or officer positions at any Meridian-funded entity. Marco Santos was reinstated with back pay, and a formal apology entered into the company's record. Issa Reyes's dismissal was expunged. An offer of permanent employment was extended, subject to her acceptance. She went back to the office on a Thursday morning. Not because of the offer, not yet. She was still thinking about the offer. Because permanent employment at a company whose executive team had just been removed was a situation that deserved careful thought. She went back because Marco had asked her to come and see something. He met her at the security desk. Rick was there, and he handed back her temporary badge without being asked, with the particular smile of someone who had been looking forward to that moment. "You didn't have to come in person," Marco said as they waited for the elevator. "I wanted to." He led her to the conference room on the 14, the table where Victor had set down her printed calculation, and looked past it. Someone had left a window open, and the room smelled of the rain that had fallen overnight. Marco sat down across from her. He looked tired in the specific way people look when they have done something difficult and are not sure yet whether it was worth it. "I kept thinking about why I didn't speak up in the first place," he said. Isa waited. "I told myself it wasn't my decision. I told myself it was above my level. I told myself that speaking up would create problems, and that the problems might not even matter in the end." He looked at his hands. "What I really meant was that I was afraid of Victor, and I dressed that fear up in procedural language so it would look reasonable." Isa opened the notebook to the inside cover. She had been thinking about whether to show him this. She had decided that she would. She turned it toward him. He read the inscription slowly. His lips moved slightly on the Tagalog, finding his way through it. "Huwag hayaang takutin ka ng kapangyarihan ng iba. Ang totoo ay palaging mas matibay." "Your father wrote that?" "The last time he was well enough to hold a pen." Marco was quiet for a moment. "What does he mean? The truth is stronger?" Isa thought about it. "I think he means it outlasts. Not that it wins immediately. Not that it wins without a fight." She looked at the inscription. "But that you can build on it after everything else has stopped working." Marco looked at the window. The BGC skyline was doing what it always did in the morning, collecting light and sending it back in pieces. "I submitted that correction because I couldn't sleep," he said, "not because I was brave." "What's the difference?" He looked at her. "Bravery isn't the absence of fear," Isa said. "It's what you do after the fear stops being a good enough reason." Marco was quiet for a long moment. Then he said something that surprised her. "Your father would have been a very annoying person to argue with." Isa laughed. A real laugh, the kind that came out surprised and unguarded, the kind she had not made in the conference room, not in the lobby, not during any of the 4 days the audit was running. It felt like something returning. "Before I end this story, I want to leave you with this. Victor Lim fired Isa Reyes because he believed she was replaceable. He had looked at the rubber shoes, the second-hand blazer, the worn notebook, the boarding house address, and he had concluded that the person carrying these things had no power worth respecting. He was right that she had no power yet. She had only the truth, and he fired her for it anyway. Dado Reyes built a company by trusting accurate information even when it was inconvenient. His daughter found a company presenting inaccurate information and reported it because that was what she had been taught to do. The power came later. The truth came first. And the truth, as her father wrote in unsteady handwriting from a hospital bed, is always stronger, not always faster, not always louder, not always acknowledged immediately by the room full of people who are choosing comfort over conscience, but stronger." Marco Santos knew the numbers were wrong before Isa walked in. He said nothing, not because he was a bad person, but because fear is an excellent reason when you dress it in procedure. He chose differently later. That choice cost him his job for 3 days and gave him back his sleep. The question this story leaves with you is the one Marco asked himself at 2 a.m. before he wrote that correction. If I stay silent, what exactly am I protecting? Not the company, not the investors, not the employees, not the truth. Only the people who are already comfortable. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Like this video, subscribe to this channel, and we will see you in our next story.